Hello, Janice.
Good morning, Anthony.
Today we're discussing multisig versus a passphrase for your Bitcoin Executor. Using a multisig or a passphrase, which we've described as a possible poor man's multisig, are two good ways to transfer custody to your Bitcoin Executor upon your death. So we're going to compare those two so that you can decide which best fits your Bitcoin inheritance plan. So first, we'll review why multisig or poor man's multisig for your Bitcoin inheritance. Basically, it's the main feature is that you're splitting access so that it's not catastrophic if you lose or get hacked for any one of your keys. If you by contrast, if all of your stash is in a single sig wallet, then the seed phrase or the access to that one key will cost you all of your Bitcoin.
Right.
Whether
all your eggs are in one basket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I said all your eggs are in one basket.
Yes.
Yes.
So if that one key is lost, you lose it all. If that one key is hacked, it's all stolen, etc. So it's all in, exactly like you said, all in one basket. Alternatively, if you have a multisig or, again, a poor man's multisig with a passphrase, losing one information item is not necessarily catastrophic. And so it makes you it allows you to be less uptight with your security practices. You should still be very, very secure with how you manage your security materials, but Absolutely. It's not so like there's a little bit more margin for error. Yes?
Yes.
Now, just be aware, we have talked about the passphrase as a poor man's multisig in the past, but be aware, it's not really designed for this. There's not going to be much support for this particular use case. If you have a non-professional executor, if you have a friend or a family member who you've chosen as your executor and you have set it up as a poor man's multisig through passphrase, and they go to Google or Reddit or whatever and try to figure out what exactly is going on, they might have trouble finding information on that. Yeah.
Right.
Whereas a multisig actually has real legit companies that support and will happily take a consultation fee to walk you through that.
Right. Happily. Right.
Also, what we're discussing is not necessarily what's the best setup for estate administration, meaning the months or years during which your executor is managing your estate, but rather that immediate transfer of custody. We can talk about that, how the executor would hold your keys during his tenure as your executor. That could be a totally separate conversation.
Right.
But this analysis is specifically how multisig or passphrase will impact, or the pros and cons of how those will smoothly or not smoothly transfer from you, you're dead, to your executor. Yep. Sorry to be so blunt about that.
But it is what it is. Right.
And lastly, we're not really discussing the general pros and cons of multisig versus single sig with passphrase because there's a lot of them. There's a lot of pros and cons like multi-vendor versus single vendor risk and the costs of multiple hardware wallets and things like that and the ease of setting it up. Those are all legitimate points of conversation. But for this particular brief analysis, it's just about how will your executor, which one is better or
right.
Pros and cons of actual transfer upon your passing. Okay?
Correct. Yep.
All right. So let's go into the first one, using a passphrase as your poor man's multisig for your Bitcoin executor. So just to quickly review, what you're doing is you have a single sig wallet, but on top of your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, you have added an additional passphrase, almost like the 25th word or 25th phrase, or in 13th, right, depending on what you have.
Right, yep.
As a second layer that you need those two things to access your Bitcoin stash. You can't just have the 12 or 24 words. You need that and the additional phrase, okay?
Yep.
Does that make sense, Janice?
Absolutely. You need that one additional thing to make it work.
And that's how you get that minimization of risk. If you accidentally reveal your 12 or 24 words, you're still okay as long as they can't get the passphrase. And if somebody gets your passphrase, vice versa.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So what are the pros of this setup? Well, first of all, it is easier for a non-Bitcoin executor in theory because it can kind of feel like just a second password. We'll talk a bit later about multisig can be kind of intimidating because it's like, you know, those movies with the nuclear submarine where the captain and the first mate each put a key in and turn 1, 2, 3.
Yes,
turn.
exactly. You have to have both of those in order to make, yes.
Whereas passphrase just feels like, you know, you're logging into your bank. I mean, not just like because the seed phrase is complicated to a
Correct.
a Bitcoin, but it just feels like, oh, I just got to put in this one more password. You know, it feels like something that you've done before, probably.
Right. Probably a little easier on the exec, right? Just especially if they don't know the Bitcoin.
The other risk, or this is a double-edged sword, but another benefit potentially is that your seed phrase is pretty secure the way it's been designed. I mean, I'm not a security expert or a cryptographer, but from my understanding, your seed phrase, whether it be 12 or 24 words, is pretty secure. It would be very unlikely for a hacker to have enough computing power to just brute force it, meaning try enough times that they just guess it. Yeah.
Right.
A passphrase can be brute forced. It doesn't have the built-in security features of the 12 or 24 word seed phrase. First of all, you're making up your own words, which we are really bad at being random. So it can be guessed from like just like we know
Cat,
that this
dog.
person we know this person liked Game of Thrones. So there's a famous quote from that show, and yep, that's it.
There it is. Yep.
So why is this a benefit? Because if you lose it, or if you fail to transfer it successfully to your heirs in Bitcoin Executor, there is at least hope that you can recover it through. It's not easy. Apparently, from what I've read, that it'll take months with a lot of money spent on renting out high-powered computers. So it'll be expensive and time-consuming, but it is theoretically possible at least.
Okay.
So again, that actually sounds like a lot more of a con than a pro, but it's, just putting it out there.
Well, at least you could get to it. I mean, it's going to be really expensive and time consuming, but you could. It's not gone. Yeah.
And then lastly, your passphrase can potentially be hidden in plain sight. So it's a little easier to manage in terms of how to transfer to your executor. One example is, this is totally the Da Vinci Code level stuff, which we do not recommend. But
no,
if you write a letter to your executor and you tell him verbally, every fifth word, if you take those, that is my passphrase. Like, dear Anthony, how are you? You is the first part of the you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't do that with a 12 with the 12 or 24 words, because that word set, the finite set of words that are used for the 12 or 24 seed phrase are known. So there are hacker algorithms out there that just scan a letter to see if there's any combination of those 12 or 24 words, right?
Wow.
And they just pull them out. So you can't do that with again, this is my understanding. Anyone call me out if I'm technically inaccurate on this, but that is my understanding. Well, again, with the passphrase, you can choose any words you want. Again, we're bad at being random, so that's not a good thing. But you could potentially hide it in plain sight a little easier. Does that make sense? Is that clear?
It does. Yeah. It does.
Okay. So that's the passphrase. Let's move on to the multisig. Just to quickly review, the difference between the passphrase and multisig is the passphrase is the single sig with an additional phrase, second layer password. Multisig is where the typical multisig is usually a 2 of 3, where you have 3 independent keys, 3 independent seed phrases and or hardware devices, and you need 2 of them to access the Bitcoin. Again, this is that image from the nuclear submarine where you put 2 keys in. It's actually, you don't have to do it simultaneously, but just to help people remember. And you need 2 out of the 3 that exist to make a transaction.
Yes.
Now, one of the main benefits of the 2 of 3 multisig is you have more leeway for error than you do with a 2 of 2, which is what the the passphrase is.
Right.
What do I mean by that? In the passphrase setup, you have 2 things you need, 2 and only 2, your 12 to 24 word seed phrase and your passphrase. If you lose either one, if you lose either one, you're done. You can't get back to that Bitcoin. Whereas if you have 2 of 3 keys, and if one of those keys goes missing, you still have the other 2.
Still have 2, correct.
That makes sense, yes?
It does make sense, yes.
So you have that margin for error in terms of catastrophic loss. Yeah?
Yes. I'm still back on the submarine analogy. You've got two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. So second benefit is that each key is strong, meaning we just talked about this. The passphrase is self-generated. So we're really bad at being random. It could be very easily to sort of detected. It could be your kids' names. Oh, that was easy. It could be your favorite quote from a movie. That, again, very easy just by you browsing your social media or whatever. So the individual keys in the multisig have the full sort of protection of the fully developed standards for this encryption. Whereas the passphrase, it kind of depends on if you use like a one-word passphrase like vanilla, because my favorite ice cream is vanilla, whatever.
Right.
That's a terrible passphrase,
Right.
And if you use 6 to 8, which I think is the standard, you have some pretty good protection. But if you go further than that, then you run the risk of, now it's getting complicated, and I made it too complicated. Correct. Right? So,
got to find that balance between too easy and too complicated.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally. And then lastly, the passphrase may be harder to rebuild than the 12 to 24 word seed phrase of one of your 3 hardware keys. And what do I mean by that? And I'm going to call this the smudge risk.
Okay.
So I think I mentioned earlier, Janice, that the 12 or 24 words for your seed phrase come from a finite set of possible vocabulary words, okay?
Right.
And actually, my understanding is you actually only need the first 4 letters. So if one of the seed phrase words is, I just said vanilla, right? It's actually only VANI. Did I spell vanilla correctly? Yeah.
Yeah.
You actually don't need to know if it's fully vanilla.
Oh.
Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's good, because what if you spell it wrong or right?
Exactly. So what do I mean by the smudge risk? So if the seed phrase for one of the 3 keys that you need is handwritten, but it's either illegible or smudgy or like water damage has occurred.
Okay.
As long as you can get the first 4 letters and you know that there's a finite set of words from which those 4 letters can be chosen from, right?
Okay.
It's like a limited dictionary.
Yeah, right.
It narrows the field. But if you have a smudged handwritten word from a passphrase, which can be any word, it could actually be gibberish. It doesn't even have to be a word.
Oh, it doesn't have to be a real word.
Right.
You could make it. Oh, interesting.
There's almost no way to
so you can't even guess.
To reverse engineer that word. Yeah, does that make sense?
Right. If it's not even a word, it's just like some made up. Yeah. Oh.
So, we're kind of getting into sort of security and in cryptography topics that is way above my understanding. But so I'm sure if a professional security expert came on here, like, what are you talking about? Please call me out and help me educate our listeners on what's on any inaccuracies. But this is my understanding that the smudge risk is there.
And what you're focusing on is this after death, right? When your executor has to piece together all of these things.
Exactly.
So you don't lose it. Right.
And I'm sure there's many counterbalancing factors, meaning in terms of what's easier to use during your life. As we mentioned before, we're not focusing on that for the purposes of this little chat. We're just focusing on, if you have a Bitcoin Executor, what are they looking at and what do they have to deal with? Yeah,
exactly.
That's it. That's all we have. It's I hope I've got most of the technical details mostly right. I think I have. I hope, and I hope this helps you to make your decision on how to what makes most sense for you in terms of how to split up your or keep your stash in a non-single sig setup so that it is easier for your executor to carry on for you upon your passing.
Yeah, and continue to let us know, because we do get a lot of this information and questions from people that are listening and on our email list. But I recommend Anthony's book, How Probate Works, available on Amazon, because that's going to give you the basics of how and what the executor is going to have to deal with. And then you're going to have to put Bitcoin right on top of that. Yeah.
It's a lot. It's
going to be so easy.
Yeah.
No.
Well, we're doing our best here to help. This is a widely recognized as an area that will be a problem as Bitcoiners age out and pass on. So we're doing our best to help sort of suss out and think through a lot of these issues. And hopefully we're just, adding to the community of thoughts. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Janice, as always. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And we will talk soon again next time. Bye now.
Talk soon.